Ever wondered what ancient Romans actually ate? Forget everything you think you know about Italian food. No tomatoes, no pasta as we know it, but they did have fish gut sauce and fast food joints. Let's explore Rome's real food story. Here's something that'll blow your mind. Ancient Romans would be super confused if you served them a plate of spaghetti and meatballs. Their version of pasta was more like a flatbread called lagana, kind of like a distant cousin of modern lasagna. They'd roll out wheat dough into flat sheets, sometimes layer it with meat or fish and bake it. No twirling forks here. And get this, they actually thought boiled dough was pretty weird. The whole idea of cooking pasta in water didn't catch on until way later, probably thanks to Arab traders bringing noodle-making techniques to the Mediterranean. So next time someone tells you spaghetti is an ancient Roman tradition, you can set the record straight. Let me introduce you to garum, the ancient Roman equivalent of ketchup, except way fishier. Imagine taking a bunch of fish guts, throwing them in a barrel with tons of salt, and letting them ferment in the hot Mediterranean sun for months. Sounds gross, right? But Romans were obsessed with this stuff. They poured it on everything from breakfast to dessert. Rich Romans would pay crazy money for the highest quality garum. We're talking prices that'd make modern caviar look cheap. The smell was so intense that garum factories had to be built outside city limits. But here's the wild part. Modern scientists say garum was actually super nutritious, packed with protein and omega-3s. Ancient Roman superfood. Anyone? You think food trucks are a modern invention? Ha! Romans had street food figured out 2,000 years ago. They called these spots thermopolia, basically ancient fast food joints. Picture a counter with big clay pots sunk right into it, keeping stews and soups warm all day. These places were everywhere in ancient Rome. Archaeologists found about 150 of them in Pompeii alone. The menu? Hot sausages, stewed lentils, spiced wine, and ready-to-go snacks. Most Romans lived in apartments without kitchens, so these spots were their go-to for a quick bite. Think of them as the original McDonald's minus the golden arches and with way more garum sauce. Want to know what was more precious than gold in ancient Rome? Wheat. The empire ran on bread, literally. Every Roman citizen got a free grain allowance, and emperors knew that hungry citizens meant angry citizens. They shipped in so much grain from Egypt that you could probably fill 20 modern cruise ships with it daily. The sailors who brought grain to Rome got special perks, instant citizenship and tax breaks. Talk about a sweet deal. And those massive grain warehouses in Rome's port city, Ostia. They were better guarded than the emperor's treasury, because you can't eat gold but wheat. That kept Rome's 1 million people fed and happy. When politicians promised bread and circuses, they weren't kidding about the bread part. You think black pepper is expensive now? Ancient Romans would laugh at our prices. They were dropping the equivalent of a modern worker's monthly salary on just a few pounds of pepper. The spice trade was Rome's version of the oil industry, absolutely massive. Ships battled monsoons to reach India, while camel caravans trekked through deadly deserts, all to bring exotic spices to Roman tables. Cinnamon, ginger, cloves, Romans couldn't get enough of them. They used these spices to show off their wealth, sprinkling gold-worth saffron on their food like it was nothing. Emperor Nero actually burned a year's worth of Rome's cinnamon supply at his wife's funeral. Talk about a costly send-off. Think the gap between fancy restaurants and fast food is big today? Ancient Rome's food scene was even more extreme. Rich Romans threw wild dinner parties with roasted peacocks, stuffed dormice, yeah, those cute little mice, and fish shipped live across the Mediterranean. Meanwhile, most Romans lived on a simpler menu, lots of bread, porridge, vegetables, and a bit of fish or meat when they could afford it. The really poor? They basically lived on a grain mush called pulse. Imagine oatmeal's boring cousin. But here's the funny part. Rich Romans actually fetishized simple food while serving ridiculously expensive dishes, kind of like modern influencers posting about their humble avocado toast. Here's a crazy thought. Rome didn't just conquer with swords, they conquered with sandwiches. Well, sort of. The Romans were super smart about using food as a political tool. They'd roll into new territories, and instead of just forcing everyone to eat Roman food, they'd mix local ingredients with Roman cooking styles. Pretty sneaky, right? They also used their grain supply like a weapon. Play nice with Rome, get access to their massive food network. Act up? Suddenly your city's grain shipments might accidentally get delayed, and those Roman soldiers marching across Europe, they weren't just spreading Latin, they were spreading olive trees, grapevines, and Roman farming techniques everywhere they went. Talk about a tasty takeover. Hey, even the mighty Romans had their kitchen nightmares. Take Emperor Elagabalus. This guy once served his guests painted rocks instead of real food as a prank. It didn't end well for him. Or consider the infamous flamingo tongue incident, where a noble's entire feast caught fire because he tried to flame cook hundreds of tongues at once. But these fails actually led to some amazing discoveries. When a sleepy cook accidentally left bread dough near a fire too long, they invented the crusty bread Romans became famous for. And that time someone spilled fish sauce into wine. They created a popular drink. Roman cooking wasn't all fancy feasts and perfect recipes. It was a wild experiment that shaped how we eat today. You've probably heard that Romans had these wild feasts where they'd eat until they were stuffed, throw up, and start eating again. Here's the thing. That's total Hollywood nonsense. Romans actually thought throwing up at dinner was super gross. What really happened at Roman feasts was way more interesting. They turned eating into an art form. Dishes came out in carefully planned sequences. There were live performances between courses, and hosts competed to serve the most creative foods. Sure, some emperors went crazy with exotic stuff like peacock brains, but most fancy Roman dinners were more about showing off clever cooking and having great conversation. They were basically ancient dinner parties with better togas. Ready to cook like a Roman? It's easier than you might think. Take Maritum. It's basically the great-great-grandparent of modern pesto. Grab some herbs, cheese, olive oil, and a pinch of salt, mash it all together, and boom, you're eating like Julius Caesar. Or try libum, a cheese bread that Roman priests loved. It's just cheese, eggs, and flour, baked until golden. The coolest part? We know these recipes work because they come straight from ancient Roman cookbooks. Some Roman guy named Apicius wrote down hundreds of recipes, and modern food scientists have tested them all. Trust me, they taste way better than garum. Thanks for joining me on this tasty trip through ancient Rome. If you enjoyed discovering these wild food facts, smash that like button and subscribe for more historical adventures. Share with your food-loving friends. They'll never look at Italian food the same way again.